Good morning all over the world, Bangladesh and Cape Town. We are so happy you're all here today as usual. We put up an open meeting once a month, and we are so honored to have somebody to speak to us about the Post-Polio Network in Scotland. And I am going to turn it over to John McFarland because John knows Mr. Allan so well, and he is going to be our translator. If any word comes up that works over that side of the pond and doesn't work on this side of the pond, John is going to translate for us. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McFarland, who, as you all know, has very capable hands. So take it away, John.
Thank you, Ina. Good afternoon, all. First of all, can everybody mute themselves? Because what we're going to do is George will be talking to us in a few minutes, and we want to be able to hear what he says without getting a lot of interruptions, like my dog usually starts barking halfway through. We also would ask you not to cut in and start asking questions. We will take questions at the end of George's talk to us, so we can go from there. And now I'm going to say, George, I'm going to introduce you. You're the chair of the Scottish Post-Polio Network. You had polio when you were young. Everybody should have had a newsletter. And that reminds me, if any of you are new, would you put your email address into the chat so we can keep you up to date? So that's going to be Mr. Carmichael from Kirk-and-Tilloch is doing it immediately. And then we can keep you up to date. And you would have had a biopic of George. So I'm not going to repeat that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and say, George, take it away.
Oh, thanks very much. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to give you some insight into the work of PPS groups in the UK and in Scotland in particular. Although I'm chair of the Scottish Post-Polio Network, I'm also a member of the British Polio Fellowship, and I see a couple of colleagues are on view from there today. And within the BPF, I'm vice chair of our local branch and a member of BPF's Scottish branch as well. Given the nature of the SBPN group, this will be a low-tech presentation, no slides, no charts, etc. And if you'll forgive me for reading from a script, just in case I forget what I'm here for. Okay, brief introduction. SBPN was formed in 1999 by a group of members from British Polio Fellowship who were a bit concerned that that organisation wasn't at that time really recognising PPS as a valid condition. Subsequently, of course, from 2008, BPF acknowledged the reality of PPS and has gone on to produce some wonderful material and information for members and making awareness of the condition to the public and to the medics. That being said, next year will be our 25th birthday. And it's impossible to tell you everything that's gone on over the last 25 years. So I'll highlight some of the achievements in influencing the direction that decision makers have taken us on, and how we've managed in some ways to fulfill our campaigning mission. Before that, as this is an international group, it's worth clarifying the health system in the UK. It's not a unified system. There are 4 nations within the United Kingdom, and each nation operates its health service in a totally different way. In Scotland, we are divided into 13 separate health boards, and that's interesting because we can't say that any decisions made at the government level about what should be done, what priorities should be across the country. It's up to each individual health board to set their own priorities. And indeed, back in the day, it was clear that many health boards didn't even recognise PPS. However, that's another story. Okay, I've been a member of SPPN for about 7 or 8 years, but only chair for about 5 years. And this tale I'm about to tell is really by way of recognition of the work of the past committee members. In 2006, we successfully petitioned the Scottish Government to gain recognition for PPS and as a condition, and for better services for patients. This was a huge job, and credit to the former chair, Helene McLean, for her hard work, and credit to the politicians who backed us at that time. In 2007, Elaine started a list of consultants who were interested in or had some knowledge of polio and PPS and were willing to accept referrals. I know that that's a question often asked on various sites by people. Where can I find somebody who knows about PPS? Well, we've got that list, which is, but unfortunately, although we try to continue to keep it updated, individuals retire or move on or die, and it's not been easy to replace them by younger medics, because as we know, the newer younger medics don't even have any training in polio, far less PPS. In 2009, in Australia, they published the Queensland report, which talked about the management of PPS. And SPPN made copies of this report and made it available to all of their members, so they would be in a position to talk confidently to their GPs, and also to use it as a way of informing GPs. This recognition and use of work by others is manifested when, in 2018, I persuaded the head of the primary care in Tayside, our local NHS, to distribute the digital edition of the BPF's publication, PPS Again, to the management for healthcare professionals. An excellent document, which if I lift up, you can see the cover of that, but maybe not. Yeah, that's better. And I would encourage folk to go on to BPF's website to have a look at it. The lady who was in charge of primary care in Tayside recently moved up into the higher echelons of the Scottish health system. It's a hell of a noise. And this year I persuaded her to circulate
Judge, can you wait for 1 second? There's a noise coming in.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
to make sure everybody's muted. So if you're not muted, please mute.
Yeah, several people are not muted.
Okay, back to you, Judge.
Okay, so last year, as I said, the lady who had been in charge of primary care in Tayside was elevated to be in charge of primary care for the whole of Scotland. So I've asked her to replicate her actions and have the digital BPF report sent to all of the health boards. Hopefully they'll distribute them to the GPs as was done in Tayside. But however, you can take a horse to water, but whether it will drink, that's another question. In 2019, we had a major press campaign to raise awareness with the general public, and a TV personality of the time who happened to also be a patron, Elaine C. Smith, fronted this campaign. Trouble is, nowadays it's really very difficult to find celebrities to help promote the cause. The crucial year for SPPN was 2010, with the publication of what is commonly known as the SMASAC report. SPPN lobbied the Scottish Government, and with the aid of 2 MSPs, that's members of the Scottish Parliament, who were passionate about their cause, achieved the production of the Scottish Medical Science Advisory Committee report, Post-Polio Syndrome and Related Effects of Polio. 5 members of SPPN worked on the advisory committee with 14 consultants of various specialities and 3 members of the Secretariat. The key recommendations were that there should be a greater awareness of the condition within primary care. And one suggestion was that the BPF publication on PPS and the Queensland Review should be readily available. This didn't really happen from the centre until SPPN took action, as I've just stated. Another recommendation was that a simple description of referral pathways should be produced. That didn't happen either, but it's now happening this year, not by the medical profession, but by BPF's expert panel led by Francis Quinn. And I notice Francis is with us today. That publication is in draft form and is now out for consideration, for consultation across the UK. Another recommendation was that there might be specialist centres and specialist nurses for PPS. That hasn't happened either. Another recommendation was the improvement of orthotics services to meet the needs of polio survivors. Now that's another story, which I'll come back to. Continue on with the SMASAC. At the European Polio Union Conference in 2010, the following words reinforced the achievements of SMASAC. I quote, "SMASAC was an example of how polio survivors working with government can encourage medical professionals to accept the existence of PPS and bring about awareness of the plight of polio survivors, many years after contracting polio. The chair of the SMASAC group, Professor Jim McKillop, said of the 5 SPPN members of the group, and I quote, "Without their willingness to share their personal experiences and those of their fellow members, the working group would not have been able to gain such a detailed insight into the key issues." In 2013, SPPN secured funding to stage and run an Orthotics Conference in Scotland. This was attended by 23 professional delegates and 42 polio survivors. This gave polio survivors an insight into orthotic services and also raised awareness of the special needs of polio survivors amongst the professionals. Again, most of the assurances of improvement given at that conference didn't fully materialize. In 2016, 2 of our members attended the Polio Australia conference and brought back lots of information from what's happening in the Antipodes. In 2017, as part of their initiative to bring PPS to the attention of all the parliaments, BPF mounted a session at Holyrood, to which MSPs were invited. I'd just taken over as the chair role at that time and was able to attend the Holyrood event with a number of our MSP members, along with BPF members. The introductory speech was delivered by Alex Neil, MSP, and the keynote speech, which was written by our secretary, Susan Allan, was delivered by our outgoing chair, Helen McLean. Both speeches were received well by the audience of polio survivors. It's just a pity that no other MSPs were there to hear it. However, Alec Neil did email our contribution to all the MSPs. Sometimes there's a lot of effort put in and not a lot of the desired outcomes are met. Okay, when I took over as chair, following the way I worked in my professional capacity, I decided that we should have a 5-year development plan. This was produced and circulated to all members, received comments, but was universally endorsed, and finally at an AGM accepted as the plan of action. Each year we've had to modify the targets according to our limited ability to address all the issues. I have to say that we're a small committee of 8. Majority are 70 plus, some with PPS, some lucky ones like me with little after effects of my polio, but we're all living with other limiting conditions. So getting to the targets is sometimes more difficult than would otherwise be if we had a staff to do the work. Sometimes I think it's just better to fire the arrow, and whatever it hits, we'll just call it the target. However, Over the years, we've had a number of patrons, notably Margot MacDonald, MSP, who opened the doors to key people in the Scottish Government and NHS. And after her passing, Alec Neil, MSP, took on that same role of keeping the doors ajar and helping us raise awareness. The current and original patron is Dr. Richard Bruno. Most of you in the States will have heard of him. He's been at the font of informed advice and knowledge, and has been of great benefit to us. The early work of another two MSPs ensured that we have developed a long-term productive relationship with the Scottish Clinical Director, who again has opened doors, headed some campaigns, and played a big role in allowing us to talk to the people who make decisions. Excuse me while I have a gin and tonic. Over the years, members have been kept up to date with all sorts of information through newsletters. And in those newsletters, they've also been able to contribute their thoughts and concerns and advice to fellow sufferers. In preparing for today, I went through some of the older copies of the newsletter, and I was absolutely astounded at the amount of information that over the years has been passed out to members to help them understand their condition, and also to try to relate that condition to their medics. We managed to get some funding for a leaflet campaign, which is this one here. I don't know if you maybe you can't see it. It's the "We're Still Here" leaflet, which with Scottish Government funding was sent to every GP's surgery across the country. But we still have to keep reminding them that, yes, we're still here. Over time, we've produced a whole number of information leaflets for our members and for the public, most of which have been overseen by Richard Bruno himself. They're now available from our website, or at least it will be again once the site has been revamped. It's currently underway at the moment. In terms of leaflet distribution, COVID has been a big handicap in getting written information out to surgeries and clinics, because the people were scared of having magazines and leaflets and paper lying around in surgeries in case of contamination. But things are improving, and just a few weeks ago, one of our committee was able to make sure that within the town in which she lives, every surgery had 10 of these leaflets back out. So we're going to have a look and see how we can replicate that elsewhere. Going back to orthotics, one of the best centres for orthotics is the Smart Centre, which is the Lothian Health Board's unit. And some time ago, we made some good progress with them, because members were dissatisfied, to say the least, with some of the service. So we worked with the head of centre, who convened a meeting at which he invited all of the patients on the register to come in. And it was an excellent day because she was able to say quite clearly, this is what we ought to be doing. This is what we can do. And then, by the way, this is what we can't do, which was really nicely honest of her, I think. They then listened to complaints and observations from the 30 to 40 people who were there. And we had a positive outcome in that they went away and re-looked at their provision. And some of the outcomes were that they extended the consultation time to 2 hours, which is great because it meant that people weren't traveling a long distance for a short consultation and then going away and then having to come back again. Things could all be done at once. And the other thing was that at these consultations, the orthotist and the technicians were present. So there was no room for the message getting lost between these two professionals when trying to fix the orthosis. The other positive thing was that they offered a review to every patient. Now that's not happened everywhere, but we've been trying to get others to follow that sort of example. There are 1 or 2 very good centres for orthotics and wheelchairs, etc. in Scotland, but there are some that are chocolate teapots. I think is maybe a good example, a good definition. Sorry, I told you I had to read the damn thing. Yeah, we've had a fight. I think that's probably the best way of describing it, with the NHS InForm, which is the online information service on all health conditions. They didn't include polio, and they certainly didn't include PPS. Now in England, the NHS UK site, which is the English site, had some really good information on both polio and PPS. And I contended that it was a cut and paste job. It could easily have been transferred over. However, the medics didn't see it that way. They said they had to look at it all themselves and give approval and put it in. But I just kept on saying it should be there. It's already there. The stuff from England, the stuff from New Zealand, the stuff from all over the world that should be on the site. And I think John put it that I maybe was a bit bullying, but I don't think I was bullying. I was just determined. And with the help of the health improvement team and the Neurological Alliance of Scotland, we finally managed to get them to accept that this was important, and it's now up and running. I think it's a tale of perseverance. Scotland has produced an action plan for neurological conditions, and we've made comments on that. We're also, as I alluded there, members of the Scottish Neurological Alliance, and this has been very helpful in that I've had a better understanding of other neurological conditions, but I've also been able to punt PPS into the arena and explain exactly what that's all about. And so many people have, with other conditions, particularly like ME, have said, hey, that's just like what we do. So there should, since we've got some sort of provision, there should be provision for PPS. So that's actually a very comforting body. We've collaborated with BPF on issues, and as I alluded to, their clinical pathways paper is out for consultation, and once that is finalised, we'll play our part in assisting its adoption in Scotland through our connections with the politicians. I'm getting near the end, folks. One recent plus is that our vice chair has negotiated hydrotherapy sessions at the university, one of the universities in Edinburgh, and we've got about 4 people attending just now, and we've passed the information out to other polio organisations so that they can get in touch and see whether it's for them. I'm currently working on a review of the orthotic services, and our secretary and members of the team are reviewing our website and our new leaflets. And kind of summing up, the difficulty of influencing the decision makers is hard enough, even more so when we're dealing with an issue that is nowhere near the top of anybody's agenda but ours. Where we've succeeded is by developing personal relationships with like-minded, sympathetic individuals, and then nurturing those relationships. Throughout the years, SPPN has concentrated on the medical side of PPS, but now, with the combined emphasis on health and social care in Scotland, we need to widen the target area. Polio survivors have additional needs, as you know, in many aspects of life: housing, transport, leisure facilities, and the list goes on. The task is huge and wide-ranging. A couple of expressions come to mind. The fields are all white, but the labourers are few. And in the case of polio survivors, getting older and getting fewer. Another thought that came to mind, that often comes to mind, is one from the States, probably from Florida, where it's hard to remember we're here to clear the swamp when we're up to our proverbials and alligators. As we, to wind up, as we in SPPN have demonstrated, the best advocates for change are the sufferers themselves. But preparing individuals for encounters with doctors, consultants, neurospecialists, occupational therapists, caregivers, etc., it's essential that we give folk the tools for self-advocacy. Thanks for listening to me.
George, thank you very much. I think one thing that comes over from George's talk is that the fact that they've reached out and they've made contact with people and kept those contacts going and developed them. Now we've got a couple of questions. Jim Arnett, wherever you are, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
I'm very interested in the poster which you showed. Could you give us some more information about how that was created, or whether or not copies of it would be available online, or as a digital version of it?
Oh, you mean the leaflet on We're Still Here?
What you held up that said we are still here.
Yeah. That was actually produced with help from, if I can get it right, which one was it? It was a Rotary group. I think it's Allan Rotary group helped that. It's not digitized. It's some time ago.
The reason I ask is that here in the United States, we often have available bumper stickers that say we're still here, that we get through Post-Polio International. But we're always looking for more information that we can hand out at the same time that we're doing other meetings for the Rotary's Polio Plus activities. We often have a site at different Rotary locations. It'd be really nice if we could have something like that. So if there's some way that you could share just a copy of it somehow.
Yeah, I could ask Susan to scan it and send it off to Ken and get that sent. If
you get it to Ken or to it'll get spread through we'll see it that way. Thank you very much. That would be very helpful.
Thanks,
George. If you get Susan to scan it, send it to me. I'll make sure it gets out.
Okay.
And I'll also make it available through we can make it available in the next newsletter as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, John. That'd be very helpful.
We've got Florence. You actually asked about are the "We Are Still Here" stickers? Are they still available? I think you just got your answer. It sounds like you have to go to PHI. But the other one is for people's information if they don't know it. The "We Are Still Here" stickers and "We Are Still Here" is heavily used by Polio Australia as well.
Yeah, it is.
I'd like to clarify a couple of points for not for George, but for the rest of you. When George was referring to MSPs, that's a member of the Scottish Parliament. So that you mentioned it, but in the UK there is the central government, then there is a devolved government in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland one at the moment is defunct. It's not working. There's a political scrap going on. Florence is shaking her head. Francis is shaking her head about it. But they are still there, and it is a matter of going through. The only centralised facility for the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, is based in London, which is an awful long way for somebody to go from Scotland. It's traveling virtually down the whole of Florida and right the way along the Keys and nearly into Cuba. So we've got that one. Has anybody else got questions of George? If they have, can they put their hands up, please?
Got a hand up, John? Dominica?
Yeah, Dominica.
Yes, I actually did put my question in the chat. I live in Jamaica, where polio was considered eradicated by the early 80s. And there are many other countries that have had polio endemic until fairly recently, and of course two that still do. So I'm wondering if the medical professionals in those countries are preparing themselves? Are they observing what is happening in North America and Europe with PPS? Are they training or becoming aware of what is to come? For example, I know a young lady who might be in her late 40s who had polio when she was 2, and she's having a lot of health problems. I don't know her well, but she lives in my community, and I suspect very strongly that PPS is affecting her now that she's sort of middle-aged, getting into middle age. Does anybody have any information on that? You know, are other countries in the world or other regions preparing? I know we have a few here from Pakistan and India, they might know.
Dominica, the general answer to that is that we're trying desperately through people like the European Polio Union and various others to actually get the information out to doctors in other countries. There are an awful lot of people who are still not prepared to listen. There are doctors who are absolutely saying that it doesn't exist, that PPS does not exist, and that is still prevalent in some countries. The body of knowledge is mostly in North America and in various other places like that, and in Europe. But what is happening is that we are trying to get it out, and that it's actually the job of this advocacy group. And we've had some doctors actually coming up in the chat as well. We're trying to get the information out, but they do not realize in the Indian subcontinent and sub-Saharan Africa, they don't realize what really is waiting around the corner in 20, 30 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Dr. Jowett, and then I'll come to you, Ina.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Sundar.
Hello, sir. Are you hearing me, sir?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Hello, all of you. I want to share my work in the post-polio syndrome regarding the post-polio syndrome. Hello?
Dr. Sundar, we can hear you, but your line is very bad. It is very difficult to hear you. I think the best thing that we can do with for Dr. Sundar is that Ken and I will connect with him. He's already been on the chat, and we'll come back to the subject later on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Ina, you've
Yes.
got a question?
Yes, George, one of the things you started with, which is always an issue that we bring up, is that keeping the docs and the medical profession informed and up to date on us is always a challenge. And you said you were trying to keep a list going, and what a challenge that was with people leaving the list. We keep coming back to that notion that we have to teach the medical profession, A, that we're still here, and B, what's happening with us. And I always find that interesting because it seems like a monumental task. And then at the very end, you said that you have to redefine and rework the tools for self-advocacy. Tell me what that means to you.
I think it's really, I suppose when I first encountered BPF, I didn't know of its existence, and I was having some of the symptoms of, I thought, of PPS, and then so I met the group, and then I met the SPPN, and as I said, 5 years ago, I took over his chair almost by accident, but I really had to seek out information about the condition. I haven't experienced it, so that was all the harder. So having to speak to people and read up on the condition, and I began to get a better understanding. But the problem, I think, the problem for a number of older survivors is that they've put up with things for so long.
I agree.
And they're not really prepared to fight the battle. And the new pathways, for instance, when they come out, they're directed at, as I understand it, at the medics. And so, and I know Frances has said that she's going to be looking at, not to use the word rightly, but a simplified version of for survivors, so that they can use the information and what the and know what should be expected of the medics. And I think that's the biggest problem, that we don't really know what should be expected from their end. We know from our end what we should expect, but sometimes the expectations are higher than actually can be fulfilled.
Well, I mean, I think that's all very valid and very helpful too, because I think we have been trying with our group to get out as much information as possible to everybody that wants it. And I think that's the only way that we can actually go into a doctor's office when someone who's 40 years old and they say, well, you're aging, and you go, no, this is different. This is not, these are not the needs of a 65-year-old. These are the needs of a 40-year-old. And so we have to be able to advocate for ourselves. And that is difficult for a lot of people who stand up to the godlike figure in a white coat who's, looming over you. So as much information as possible, I think, is really the starting point for us, which is what we're trying to do.
I think one of the things, I mean, even going to the doctor for any condition, I've found, you've got 10 minutes if you're lucky. So I always write down what I want to get across. I mean, in relation to my cancer treatment and to my bowel stuff and all that sort of thing. It's a case of, I better write it down so that I can get it across, because you can easily get sidetracked by the guys trying to give you an answer to something that you haven't actually even asked about yet. And that's maybe a very, very simple thing that we should be looking at. Just sort of these little cribs that people can take with them.
Yeah, I agree.
You have a question from Ganesh in India. Ganesh, by the way.
Hi, Ken. Good evening. Sorry, I was a little late in logging in.
Ganesh is starting up a support group in India. So God bless you for that.
Yeah. I intend to start with a press release. As rightly said here, people are reluctant to even look at the post-polio aspect, and more than often it is taken for something else. And here I would like to address one thing, is that of the comorbidities. See, comorbidities also needs to be comprehended context to the post-polio syndrome. In my case, I have Marfan's. So in Marfan's, just for example, there is a tendency of the spine having a C shape. Now, since I am also a polio survivor, there is a mix-up. So as a polio survivor, I have experienced that the weakness now has become very prominent in the back, in spine. So the endurance has got hampered. So we need to really address this post-polio in its right perspective and create an awareness, the do's and don'ts. It's not necessary that everyone will have a post-polio, but it is very important that people are aware of it and they take due precautions. I, for one, like used to go for hiking and then was very active in sports, etc. But in the late 30s, suddenly this new pain and new weakness started, that led to reduction in the activities, and even my surgeon asking me to stop working staggering hours, because the root of polio is in the spine. So
Yes.
even if I am having a desk work, it's invariably going to affect the spine.
Well, the head of medicine at the Shirley Ryan Rehabilitation said that you really have to find a neurologist who specializes in muscular neurology as well, in order for them to rule out other things and just wound up. And then they wind up with the post-polio syndrome, which they didn't believe at the beginning, but then they do now.
Yeah, and also I emphasize on the supplements, the protein supplements, calcium supplements, which also needs to be, like,
Yeah.
tested. The levels needs to be tested.
Okay. Anybody else here? Because we have to think about wrapping up a little bit. John, Georgia, was really wonderful to hear the beginnings of how you started and where you are right now. And I know it's kind of like pushing the rock uphill all the time to get people to listen and to pay attention, but you certainly have staked your claim in this, and we're so grateful to hear from somebody who's been on the battlefront for so long. Thank you.
Ina, can I address a couple of subjects quickly?
You bet.
One, we're expanding the newsletter.
Yeah.
Now, I've just had a message from somebody that says, I haven't got a copy of the newsletter. We will put those people in and make sure that they get a copy of the newsletter. So, Francis, you will get one. We'll make sure you get one. And if you can't see it, if you want to see it quickly, put Ken Masson's name into Facebook, and you'll find the copy. You'll find the notice about this meeting on there, and the newsletter is all contained within it.
Yeah.
So we can go from there. Kripin, you've got a question.
Yeah, it's more a comment, really, actually. I think what struck me from what George was saying is about how he was working with BPF and other organizations like Polio Australia and reaching out. And I genuinely believe that by everybody coming together, the voice is going to be a lot stronger. So let's all keep coming together to make our voice stronger for each other.
Correct. That's the goal. And that's why we're trying to build, the people who show up on our open meetings, so that they get the information and know how to keep getting information. So thank you, Kripin, for that, for sure. Anything else, Mr. McFarlane?
Yeah, just one thing. If anybody's got any bits or things that they want to put into the newsletter, right, because any of you have actually seen it, it's much bigger this time than it was before. Could they please send it to the ppsadvocacy@gmail.com?
Yes.
And we will try and get it included. And if you've got references or anything else like that, give them to us. It's a way of getting a lot of information out to a lot of people, and we put it on Facebook, and so we're getting out to a very large audience.
Yes.
A very big audience.
And I don't know if you saw, but Francis Quinn put a link to an article of PPS in China on the chat. Take a look at it. Maybe something good for the newsletter.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Good. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all. The steering committee meeting is going to be the second Wednesday, and then our open meeting will be the fourth Thursday of July. So I look forward to seeing you all here again. And all that information will be in the newsletter. And yes, please send information to us if you want to have it included with the links. Anything else? Thank you all. Thank you all. Have a sweet holiday weekend here in the US.